Hi friends, it's been a bit of a minute, hasn't it? This has been a lot longer than I intended it to be. I've kind of been going through a lot of mental health things, a lot of things in my personal life, like just kind of getting my life back on track. And it kind of just took it out of me, especially because the end of last year and the beginning of this year was crazy. There was some crazy stuff going on. I don't want to get into it too much, but I will try and get into some of it in this video. But yeah, let's just say it's been a hard flipping time here at HQ. I'm trying to come back. The fact I'm here making this video hopefully proves that. It may take me time to get videos out, but I'm trying to put the fun back into video making. But before we can get into any of my sort of future plans of what I'm doing, let's update everybody, like what the hell's been going on. So first of all, and this may upset some of you, I haven't got Clifford anymore. And this is simply because Clifford had turned into a money pit. I bought the car for £1,000 and I put over £2,000 into it. Now, you might say that's not that much money for trying to restore something, but you have to remember, I spent £2,500 just getting that car to a point where it could run and drive. This car was a mess. Basically, everything I interacted with was junk. The shock absorbers were junk except for the front ones. The shock absorber mounts, for example, were chewed out by mice. If you remember the mice damage when I was doing the videos on this car, they'd actually eaten the strut top mounts, so the struts had actually come down lower than they should have been. And I only realised this because at the time I had Ralph, so I was able to have a reference, and I kind of looked at that and I was like, oh. Not to mention, I think we had bad wheel bearings, all of the brakes were shot, various interior components were just so run down. There was rot that I didn't know about as well, hiding away. So obviously we had rot under the windscreen when I took it out. I tried for the entire time I had that car to try and get a windscreen and was unsuccessful. And Pilkington, I think, wanted like £300, I think, to supply me one, not to fit it, because I don't think Pilkington does any of the fitting, which is fair enough. But it was just to supply it. That was a real problem. And it's because Pilkington has to essentially spin these up as jigs, because it's not every day that someone asks for a windscreen for a 1986 Austin Montego. It doesn't happen. So I understand. The car was nickel and diming me, especially as I was finding new rot and things like that, and a lot of it was still unproven. I got really tired of it in the end. It had clearly had a very hard 10 years of life and 136,000 miles. Also, did I mention that the fuel tank was completely full of tar? So someone, before the car went away in 1995, the last year it was on the road, actually nearly brimmed the tank with, there was about 15 litres left of 4-star from when they brimmed the tank. And unfortunately, the vast majority of this 4-star petrol had turned to mushy tar, and the entire fuel tank was full of it. I mean top to bottom, full of like a gelatinous sort of tar. So when I drained the fuel, the tank was still full of crap. And not to mention that it was rusting on the inside, I suspect from condensation and things like that. And maybe this waxy substance was turning corrosive as well. That's very possible. So I had this fuel that was essentially a brain poison that had turned itself into complete gunk, which meant that it was never safe to put anything back in it. I would have had to cut the tank open. Because if you don't know, the fuel tanks in most cars like that, they've got partitions. It's to stop like sloshing, I think, and noise, and possibly to help with ventilation as well, I think. But everywhere was full of this tar, okay? As well as lots of rust. I could not, for the life of me, get it out. So this car now needed a fuel tank. And if you've ever looked for a fuel tank for an Austin Montego, it's incredibly difficult to find a good one because they're all gone and rotten. There's no good ones left, and you might even find there's some left like mine that are just full of tar from old fuel. At the end of the day, I had to break this car. I had to chop body cuts off of it. I took loads of parts off of it. Now, it might sound sacrilege that I did this, especially as they're getting rarer and rarer every day, but that's the problem. They're getting rarer and rarer every day. That means a lot of parts just don't exist anymore. Literally, a lot of like what I would call service parts, nobody makes them. You know, you can get things like distributor caps and oil filters and that sort of stuff. Oil filters mainly because they also fit other things, but suspension components, they're getting hard to find now. Engine mounts, they're getting hard to find now. A lot of the time you're fighting for either new old stock parts or used parts, and whenever they come up in like the Facebook groups, it's often a bidding war. You know, people want these parts because they're always broken. And like me, people have been waiting years to find these parts, so it's first come, first served. In addition to that, parts are then expensive as well, because people can price whatever the hell they want, especially if it's a particularly rare part. So it either doesn't exist, it's expensive, or both. And the car was nickel and diming me. I couldn't do it anymore. But there is a silver lining from it. Because I broke this car, I was able to supply parts to fix the other two Montegos, which I'm about to mention in a minute. So what about Ralph? Ralph was another one of my Austin Montegos that I had. Another estate, just like Clifford. Now, a lot of parts from Clifford actually went on this car. One of the rear doors, for example, one of the wings, I think possibly other bits as well. So that was very helpful to Ralph. But then I couldn't keep Ralph either, because Ralph needed a lot of welding and still needed quite a bit of work because that car had been sat for ages. So I ended up selling it back to the original owner, who then sold it again to someone in Ireland. So, and I've heard they're pretty rare in Ireland, so good luck to the person restoring that car. And incidentally, actually, some of the other doors from Clifford went to someone in Ireland. Now, it would be hilarious if it went to the same person sorting this car, because I suppose now they've got spare doors for it, but apparently they are just super rare in Ireland, and there's a huge demand for the cars and the parts. So there you go. Hopefully both that car and the parts from that car are helping someone in Ireland. And ultimately I made a huge loss on both cars, because yes, I've sold some of Clifford's parts to people who have been very grateful, and I sold Ralph for a fraction of what I paid for that car, and what I paid for that car was, you know, a lot less than what they were asking. But I made a huge loss on that car, because I put a fair bit of money into it. I mean, so did they, I think, at one point, to be fair. I think it was just a car that was cursed to be a bit of a money pit, a bit like Clifford. The car had to move on. We're still friendly about it, you know. I've got no ill will against the person I bought the car from. You know, we still chat from time to time. We're in a good place. So it's just how it goes. That's cars, you know. I don't blame anybody in this. Old cars, especially ones you can't buy bits for, it's always going to be a minefield of price, time, and all that sort of thing. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I've only got so much space, so much time, and so much money, you know. Money doesn't grow on trees, sadly. It's difficult. You know, I don't have the room to keep dead cars here that need loads and loads of work, especially because if they sit outside, they do deteriorate when you're not using them, and they're just sat there and you're not moving them and that sort of thing. So I couldn't do it. That car had to go as well. So what about Noah? Noah's kind of the poster child of my Austin Montego obsession, you know, was the car I wanted ever since I was a kid. And I do love that car, genuinely I do. But I'm not gonna lie, in recent years, as that car's been off the road, I've really been able to have a think to myself, and I'm thinking I may have to move that car on. Now, I don't want to, especially because I feel like if I sell this car, it's probably going to get broken for spares. I mean, granted, it's out of my control once I sell it. That is the price that you pay. He does need a bit of work. Noah does. And although someone has clearly spent a lot of money on it already, it needs a lot more spending again. The classic old car thing, when they get into a poor condition, it costs lots of money even to do it myself. And the problem is, it's again, some parts don't exist. Yes, I've got some parts from Clifford that are helpful, but there's some parts from Clifford that were also deteriorated, and there's some parts on Noah that are deteriorating that I don't have spares of. It's really hard. You know, there's potentially less than 100 surviving road-going Montegos left. And as a result of that, because the numbers aren't going to go up, or if they do, they aren't going to go up appreciably, there's probably no money in people remanufacturing these parts. In fact, the few times that people have tried to remanufacture certain parts for these cars, they have been prohibitively expensive. I mean, like, serious money. You know, things as simple as a heater core pipe costing over £100, and you think, it's just a bit of metal. But that's how much it costs when you have to have stuff custom fabricated. You know, people aren't doing this day-to-day basis. So, you know, you're no longer paying volume production prices that you might have bought this part from Austin Rover. You know, it's gone, it's expensive, it's difficult, and it's made in batches, and quite often not made at all. A lot of the time, people often get like a local metal maker to make them, which is only good if you live in that area, because otherwise, you know, postage gets expensive or whatever. So the future of these cars looks a bit bleak to me, and I hate that, because it means the only surviving cars left are going to have to be, you know, garage and trailer queens, because it's all people will be able to do. They won't be able to drive them anymore because all the parts are gone, and they'll be afraid to drive any left that still have parts because you can't get parts. So these cars have a shelf life. You know, a lot of the parts I have in the loft, you can't buy anymore. A lot of people don't even have these parts that I have used now. You know, with the dwindling supply, it's just so demotivating. You know, I really struggle with that. So I don't know at the moment if Noah's going to stay on the fleet. He might not. He may end up having to be sold on. That's one car I'm not going to break for spares though, because I don't want to do it. It would break my heart because I absolutely love that car. I would be crying every time I undid a bolt. I couldn't do it. But at the same time, that car is a lot of stress to handle because I'm looking after a dwindling museum piece, you know? That's what these cars have become. There's a reason the one that lives in Gaydon, the last one that's ever made, only comes out to events, because if anything happened to that car, they couldn't fix it, and they certainly wouldn't be able to fix it to a state that it's in now. So, you know, hats off to the people who work super hard at the Gaydon British Motor Museum, because Jesus, these cars are difficult to keep going. I mean, maybe I should donate Noah to them, but they probably wouldn't want Noah, to be honest. I did think about that, you know, like, could I just donate the car to them because it gets the car out of my hair? I can recoup a lot of costs from the parts I have, but I don't think they'd want a scruffy old HL. It's hardly something worth showing, is it? It's just how I feel at the moment. I love that car. I think it's a great car. I think they're super underrated. But what can I do? I'm up against poor survival rates. I mean, they were the 8th most scrapped car in the UK because they garnered an unfortunate reputation. And while the reputation doesn't bother me at all, the fact that I can't buy parts and there's so few left to get parts even from is a real issue. You know, it's scary. It's something that's very demotivating. So he's probably not going to stay forever, but we'll see. So what else have we had? I mean, we had a Rover 75 CDTI Tourer for a little bit, if you've been following social media. We didn't end up keeping that car because in the classic way, it needed money spending on it. It was going to be an expensive car to keep long term, as Rover 75s often are. You know, it's very easy to spend £1,000 on one of those in just simple things. Although, hats off to DMGRS, at least the parts exist. Not everything exists though, but I know they are working very hard to do that. So the people at DMGRS, you're amazing, and I love the fact that you put Mao sweets in every shipment. That's always been a delight to open the box and have some sweets. So yeah, amazing, but we just couldn't justify it long term. It was lovely to drive for a bit though. It was an automatic, and the Jatco 506e box paired really well with that engine. That gearbox was in lovely condition, so it had lovely smooth rapid shifts, and it was a lovely car, but we couldn't justify it long term. So we ended up selling it to someone who had a ZTT, and I just think that's a perfect home for it, you know, going to a Rover enthusiast that can give it the love that we might not have been able to give it. But it was an amazing car, you know, it had a TV, you know, with a full analog setup, and it had the, you know, the big screen tape deck and all that. The spec I'd always wanted of a Rover 75, so I'm glad I at least got to experience it, you know, that was cool. What else? We own a 1996 Volvo 940 2.3 low pressure turbo with that AW71 gearbox. I love that car, it's become a new favourite on the fleet. I mean, looking at it, it's tatty, it's a rough car, it's had a life, but it's very reliable, it's very comfortable, it's the cool celebration spec, you know, we're currently working to get the AC fixed, because it's a very comfortable cruiser, and it's also become the new tow car, which was something that the Rover 75 was going to be. We kind of bought it as a stopgap in case the Volvo didn't work out, because we've sent the Volvo over to a trusted mechanic to have a lot of stuff sorted for the MOT and whatnot. And but since so far I'm hearing that stuff's worked out from the mechanic, and we've got a courtesy car via my dad at the moment, I'm not worried anymore. So that also meant the Rover was surplus to requirements. But I love that 940. It's a brilliant boxy car, you know. Victor, his name is, a fantastic car, gorgeous colour. I'd love to sort it one day, especially for the fact that you know, the paintwork is awful. Someone's had a go at it, and if you look at the side, they've sprayed the rear quarters but not masked any of the glass, so the glass is just covered in overspray. It's, I don't know what someone was thinking when they were painting that, but they had obviously never heard of masking tape or newspaper. Yeah, it'd be nice to sort that one day. And it's mechanically sound, you know, the gearbox works great. I think it's only done 140,000 miles. I got very lucky because when we got it, the gearbox oil did not look very good. But I did the what they call the Gibbons method flush, and it's beautiful. The oil, we've done thousands of miles, and the oil in it currently still smells like the day I put it in, so it's working fantastically. I've had to throw quite a bit of money at the Volvo 940, to be completely honest. It was not a good car in the beginning. You know, it let us down, it broke down, but a lot of it was just deferred maintenance. Like, someone hadn't done the PCV box, vacuum pipes were perished, the IAC was full of crap, the idle air control valve. Once I did all that stuff and sort of gave it a general tune-up and clean connections and earths and that sort of thing, and also did the ignition module as well, because it had an aftermarket one for some reason. I then tracked down a genuine one and I did the thermal paste on it and everything, and it's been dead reliable ever since. It's been fantastic. So that's been a pretty good car, and I hope to keep that for a little while. And even if I don't keep that particular one, because eventually it becomes uneconomical to repair, I would definitely get another 940. I'm very much Volvo invested at this point. I really like the old classic Volvos. They're fantastic. There's a lot more I need to own, and hopefully will get a chance to own in the future, but I want to settle down and sort my finances a bit first. But yeah, Victor remains a tough old barge, and we like that. Although the car's going to need welding for the MOT, which is underway right now, at the very least, it's being sorted and it's doable, and those cars weld very well. I'm sure there'll be more welding in the future, especially with a car like this. Once it starts, it's going to continue to keep going, but it's a pretty solid car for what it is. It looks horrible, but it's actually quite solid, and it helps that they were galvanized, so at least for the first few years of their life they did fight the rot a little bit. But with most 940s, it is creeping in as they get older, especially around the roof rail. This one has the typical roof rail rot that I need to sort at some point. I wouldn't be opposed in the future if I end up having to break this car and maybe put its guts into a slightly nicer one, or maybe try and make this a nice one. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what the future holds. Obviously, you might remember Merle the Mondeo from one of the previous videos. We ended up selling Merle as well. I basically just felt like my journey with that car had come to a natural conclusion. And we ended up selling it to someone who wanted it as an economical daily over their V8 P38 Range Rover, and I can completely agree, that's a much more economical daily. And our neighbour actually spotted him driving around, so he's clearly enjoying that car, and yeah, he said he loved it when he came to pick it up, so it sounds like it's gone to a good home, especially as he's had Mondeos in the past. So we don't have Merle anymore, but rest assured, someone is absolutely adoring the economy of that old Endura DE and making sure that it continues to be driven. Because although it was a low miles car, I fully believe in a car being used, and it should be used, and you shouldn't be ashamed to use it. We've also had a 2006 Urban Fox, which we're currently selling. We've had that for a while. That was utilitarian and not the most comfortable, but has been extremely reliable. It's always got us to where we needed to go. We got 60 to the gallon out of it once. It flew through its last MOT, no problem, which was amazing. Annoyingly, shortly after the windscreen cracked, as it always goes, but yeah, it's been a good car, and we got that very cheap. You know, that car served us very well, but we're not going to need it long term, so we're moving it on to someone else. But that brings you up to date for the minute. There is an additional fleet member that we got very recently, that we got for an absolutely out of this world price, and I do mean that. But the reason I'm not showing it yet is because it's really not ready to be shown. It needs a bit of work spending into it. Not necessarily lots of money, just lots of time and sort of tidying up and preparing it. In fact, parts for it are very cheap, which I really like. So in order to get this back on the road, it's going to cost nothing, especially because it's been on the road already. It just seems to be deferred maintenance and things like that are finally catching up to it. So we've got to sort things like that. It's also currently in a DVLA administrative hell, which is beginning to start the process by the sounds of it. But I can't say when it'll be done, but it'll all be stuff that I'll mention in the video I'll make about it, because I am actually going to make a video about it. So you will be able to learn what it is and the whole story about it. But that's it for the moment. I'm going to try and make more videos, as I say. It's difficult sometimes. It's a bit of a scary world out there. I don't always feel particularly safe in it. So mental health goes through sort of fits and starts. It's kind of in the toilet at the best of times, but I'm hoping getting back into videos, interacting with everybody here again, and, you know, trying to get through the negative comments that I will inevitably get. Hopefully I can enjoy video making again a little bit, like I'm doing right now, filming on this Sony Handycam Hi8, which is actually going to be my YouTube camera of choice from now onwards, because I think it's just really cool to have fun as I'm getting back into my vintage camera hobby. But thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.